Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the podcast again today. I've got someone with me who I've known for quite some time now, a gentleman called Bob Holt. You may know Bob from his background in building Mears or Mears Group. He built Mears up to a £1 billion business and then exited a few years ago. But what you won't know is some of the other work that he's done in the background. He's done both interim sort of chief exec, interim turnaround officer, interim chief restructuring officer. Also is an active chairman. And we're going to speak today about high performing teams and about how team building is the key to turning around a business, which is where Bob's got quite a lot of experience. But rather than me talk about Bob, why don't you speak about yourself, Bob, and introduce yourself to everyone?
Good morning, Mark, and good morning for anybody who ever listens to this, I suppose. Um, as Mark kindly said, I'm best known for having built Mears. I have an accounting background, bought control of a small private business in February '96 in blue collar services, where I'd spent large majority of my working life, really. And I think it's fair to say it floated it in October '96 and it became hugely successful. It has become hugely successful. It's still carried on subsequent to me stepping down. I was chairman chief executive, built it from 3.6 million market value when we floated to I think I exited at something north of 500 million valuation. Billion revenues in social housing, tough business. And what that does, as anybody knows who's been out there building a business over 20 odd years, along the way you have your ups and your downs, and of course we had more ups than downs. But we hit a market right. I think if the book is ever written, which it won't be on Mears, it would say that we changed and professionalized the way these services were procured in social housing services. We were a professional management team, none of us builders, and we professionalized the way that it was delivered and B, how it was procured. I stepped down towards the end of my time at Mears. I got asked to go in and do a turnaround of a competitor, which had floated about a year or so before, and it just managed to scrape over the line with its first year numbers. And then, hey presto, within a month, a profit warning, within another month, two profit warnings, and you guess, three always follows two. So three profit warnings. The shareholders came to me, Bob, would you come and sort this out? And in the nicest way, without blowing smoke, I was the ideal person for it. I knew the sector better than most. It was a smaller version of what we built, and so I had no learning curve. Went in there, sorted it out. I think the first 6 months were pretty easy because that was the easy lifting, heavy lifting, but easy lifting. Knew the people, knew what it was like, and then we set about, and that business became very successful. I went in on an earning, as I would do, not necessarily on wages, on an equity kicker, and I think the share price was 23p when I got involved, and it ended up at, I think, 80p when I exited. So I did very well out of it. Thank you very much. It was subsequently sold about 18 months, a year or so later, to private equity at 125. So hugely successful. And, I'm very proud of what we did there. The key, as ever, and I used to say this to the people at Mears in the early days, don't worry about the press saying Bob Holt's Mears, Bob Holt's USA, Bob, because the first time anything ever goes wrong, it'll be put a gun to Bob Holt. It's about building the team. And clearly I have some skills, but it's about building that team with the relevant skills. And I've throughout my career always done that. I was Entrepreneur of the Year in Tibble 5 on the stock market. I've never seen myself as an entrepreneur. I've got entrepreneurial skills, obviously, but I'm all about building a team. And that's what I do. I invariably end up leading them, and I do that regularly. So on the back of that, on the back of sorting SureServe, I then I had invested along the way in a number of energy businesses anyway, as I saw and see the next stage of potential upside and growth, again around blue
Yeah.
collar services. But I got a left field approach from a business which was in the beauty sector. Again, not necessarily known for my beauty skills. And
I don't think you
when
could get much further away from blue collar workforce in social housing into beauty.
Yeah, that's right. Well, even my wife said that'll be Beauty and the Beast, then, will it? So, I mean, that sort of says it all, doesn't it? Anyway, cut a long story short, guess what? It didn't need a beauty expert. It needed a manager. It needed somebody with strong managerial skills, team building, getting in. It was a global business operating 60 odd countries, major international retail, little experience, fast moving consumer goods, little experience. However, we had lots of people in the business who were good at that. So for me, it just brought all those managerial skills to base. And for the first, I don't know, month, 6 weeks, I hardly spent an hour in the business because I was speaking to bankers, insurers, regulators, shareholders, auditors, and every day managing the process. I think that's where the skills of, if you like, running a public company and knowing all those different levels, it's quite
Yeah.
difficult. And people often said, "How do you, Bob, on one hand, go and confront a, excuse the remark, a hairy ass builder in a van, and then a shareholder who might have 50 million quid invested with it?" Easy. Treat them both the same.
Yeah.
Firm, firm but fair. You know, Anybody in Mears used to know we used to have a great initially you have a churn of people who you buy into the doctrine, buy into the DNA or not, and if they don't, you get rid. And if they do, great, support them, build them. Just the same with shareholders, isn't it? People who want to invest for the long term, come on board, please, because that's where we are. So anyway, so I did the turnaround of the beauty business again. It was major issues because it had been suspended off the stock market. So we got the shares reissued or resubmitted on the stock market. It was daily fodder for the press because there were battles with activist shareholders, including the
Yeah.
founders who had to be pushed out. So that was great time, great fun, but I mean hard work. Um, and I stepped out of that about 18 months ago and concentrated on a couple of my or a number of my private interests, and some of which were in the energy sector. So I decided now, interestingly, to get hold of a cash shell in stock market terms and reverse businesses into it and get on with it. And that has been turmoil. The building a small public company on the alternative investment market today is very different. And back in the day, I'd done 9 IPOs on AIM, so I was very much seen as the kiddie who knew exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it, how to raise money, how to manage the business, how to build a team.
Yeah.
But phew, now, difficult. Anyway, what I've done is I subsequently have, I'm just at the final throes of, hypothetically, of course, because it's a public company, bringing in a chief executive who will manage the day-to-day affairs of that business and allow me to go and do what I enjoy doing. And I'll probably look for another turnaround, bigger the better, international if possible, but if not, UK based, and put whatever skills I've developed into making better value for shareholders. That's what we're all about, total shareholder return.
Yeah, I think also the market's coming to you as a turnaround professional. I think there's a lot of companies out there that are experiencing soft numbers, and as they start experiencing soft numbers, then the pressure starts to come on, both from a working capital perspective, but also from a shareholder perspective as well. And it's very easy for a business to get into a situation where it needs an intervention, it needs a turnaround, and most companies tend to leave that till it's too late. I think that's sort of well known throughout the industry. Whereas, someone like you in the background who's got that experience, maybe is it possible that you could come in and support an existing chief exec while the business is finding it difficult, or would you prefer to wait until maybe it's time for that chief exec to leave and then you can take the chief exec role while delivering the turnaround? Which do you prefer?
Well, Mark, it really doesn't matter because, in the nicest way, without trying to sound grand or anything, I don't necessarily need wages, do I? I don't necessarily need to come in and say, "Oh, my day rate is X." I don't have a day rate, so
Yeah,
I'd be very happy to come in, try and build a relationship with a chief executive, and then ultimately either step back out or step back in further or take on a chairman's role or whatever. At the end of the day, My interest in building businesses with people, is building management teams with people, is working with people. I don't have to control everything from dot one. In saying that, I've got quite a decent track record in doing that.
See, that's interesting. I don't think a lot of chief executives, even sort of PLC chief executives, understand there's people out there that can come in and support them, more than a critical friend, someone that can come and physically, actively support them within the business. And these people like you have got no intention of taking their role, no intention of currying favor with the shareholders. What they want to do is come in and turn around this business that needs an intervention for the good of making the business better. I think a lot of people don't really understand there's people like you around who do that.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I do just that in an informal way. I obviously I'm still quite elderly. I've got lots of connections who say, "Bob, would you just have a word with these two lads?" I mean, one example, they've got an IT services business over in the West Country. They're really good lads, but they've hit that brick wall and they don't know where to go next. Well, of course I'll have a chat with them. Would it
Yeah,
cost any money? No, don't be silly. No, no, I'll have a word with them. Clearly, if I get involved longer down the road, then we'll have a discussion. But, and I just said to them, look, have you tried this? No, what do you think? So, well, you're local. Have you tried selling your services into the Chamber of Commerce? No. Do you think that might help? Well, just try and sell what you've got to your existing customer base and then just ripple out rather than try and chase a new product line. And
yeah.
oh yeah, well that seems to be anyway. So the point is, yes, of course I can do that, and I'd be very happy to.
Yeah, that's. I think especially for some of the smaller companies as well, having someone like you, as a bit of a critical friend, coming and supporting them. One, it's good for them and it shows them what the future could look like and what's possible. But for you on a personal level, it's good fun. It's
Yes,
exciting being involved in things like this.
yeah,
People are
absolutely.
always saying, well, what about the day rate? What about the title? What about if a chief restructuring officer and a turnaround, chief exec actually just enjoys this? Of
Mm,
course, people have got to get rewarded for what they do, but ultimately, don't think of that as a primary. That's actually a secondary you know,
mm,
and much the same as what you said about, how do we deal with the shareholders and how we deal with the guy in the van. Well, you deal with them the same, and we're exactly the same here. We treat candidates and clients exactly the same. And often they
mm,
switch roles throughout their
mm.
career.
Yeah,
Great,
yeah.
but I think it's just being right with people. Um, Talking about people and talking about team building, then, you know, let's say you walk into a PLC beauty business and you've got a lot of people staring at each other, maybe pointing fingers at each other, and the whole time this whole thing is going down the toilet. How do you get them to start team building? How do you get to pull that team together? How did you
It was
do it?
very interesting because the analogy is quite relevant. Because what happened? I walk into a beauty business. It's a couple of 100 million revenues. It's global. It's got a Gen Z workforce of 300 females aged, I don't know, 20 to 35.
Yeah,
It's got a senior management team. Senior management team had failed, full stop, move on. But that first line of Gen Z females, and I may have the wrong categorization for a 35-year-old female, for example, um, were two or three of the brightest people I've ever worked with, fantastic people, but wondering what the hell have we got here? And I always used to say, because it was open plan, I used to work out the boardroom and the door was always open. And I used to say, throughout the day, 50, 60, 70 people would walk past the door thinking, how do we end up with him? And they said, no, Bob, it isn't like that. I said, well, of course it is, because they wonder why have they got an old bloke sat in there running the business now. And the key is you get them together and get them to collectively buy into what is the strategy.
Bob.
And
Bob, sorry to interrupt. Your screen's gone blank.
is that better?
Now it's back.
I
Now
got
it's
an
back.
X. So we
So
go back.
yeah, so we go back to the point where it was a group of Gen Z females just before I met a couple of people who were the best people I've ever met before.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
We'll
So
edit it through. Don't worry, it'll be seamless.
indeed. So I walked into a situation where two or three hundred Gen Z females, aged up to around 35, who were absolutely excellent. Senior team had probably failed, um, and just so bright, so capable. But
Yeah.
what they couldn't understand was how they'd ended up with me, i.e., a non-cosmetic FMCG guy. So what it was about was building a team, getting credibility, getting them to buy into the strategy. And I said, I think early on, look, to a couple of them, have you not worked it out yet? I'm actually here to make sure you can pay your mortgage in 3 months, 6 months. That's what we're here to do. And
Yeah.
if we do that together, we'll get there. And there were some major troughs, some major downsides. I went over to our US business and found that, sort of 70, 80 million of stock that had just been lying on shelves, just incredible. Um, but then you've got to be positive. You've got to do what your skills have brought you to. You've got to be, you know, definite. Look, this is going to be sorted. I'll sort that out. Don't you worry about that. However, come on, guys. The strategy is simple. You know what we're here to do. You get on with it. Leave that. I'll sort the US out, for example. So
Yeah.
I think what happened was after a period of time, they bought into me. They bought into that, and it's all about getting a management team together. In the early days of Mears, I remember saying to them, "Have you worked it out, guys? The market has got it's 5.6 billion primary market and no market leadership. Have you worked it out? Because if you haven't, go and join the competition. If you
Yeah.
have, come on, because we're going to make a fortune." And guess what? We did. So, look, it's about, I mean, I played sport at a decent level. Without doubt, I was the worst footballer, worst cricketer who played at that level. But funnily enough, I was often the leader. I was often the captain because I knew Mark needed a kick and Bob needed a cuddle. And if you
Yeah.
get that wrong in developing a team where you give the wrong one a kick and the wrong one a cuddle, you've created double the problem. So that tends in a leadership scenario, that tends to come naturally, I think. Clearly you work on it and you work at it and try and build relationships. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's about having a team that complement each other. They've all got different skills. I've clearly got some skills and I've got some major weaknesses. So great. Get somebody in who is the final detail person who I'll get bored after an hour and a half. So I've got somebody who can do it for 3 or 4 hours. And it's always about that. And interestingly,
Yeah.
again, years ago in the city, one of these smart fund managers, Oxbridge, said to me, "I'm not sure I'd like to work for you, Mr. Holt." And I said, "Well, that's good because I wouldn't have you working for me. But guess what? I've got a long line of people who do want to come and work for me because decisive decision making, you'll get it exactly how it is. There'll be no bull. It'll be where are we, what we're doing." And clearly I'm no academic, but I have great view that the what management is about is setting targets,
Yeah.
checking targets, resetting targets. And it's not just that, but fundamentally every day, where are we? Where should we be? Where can we be? Come on, guys. Are we together on this? Are we not? Let's move forward. So team building, vital in any scenario.
Yeah, I've seen so many great chief executives move into chief restructuring officer, turnaround type individual positions, which I believe is a step above the chief exec role as a BAU chief exec
Right.
role. And I've seen so many do that, and they always seem to have a very, I think I'm right in saying it's a simplistic view in terms of a simplistic
Yeah.
strategy,
Yeah.
understanding the whole market, setting targets to deliver that simplistic strategy, and making sure that people deliver against those targets and monitor it in the beginning, hourly, daily, weekly. And if people don't perform, and I'm afraid they can't stay,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
it's not brutal, it's saving the business, it's losing a few for the good of the greater.
It's interesting. I bumped into a couple of guys overseas in a airport terminal, airport lounge. Brits, we're in America. Brits, can we sit in these seats? Yes, yeah, yeah. Who are you? What are you? Da, da, da. And I said, "Oh, well, I'm in social housing." The guy said, "So was I." I said, "Oh, I built Mears." "No, you can't know Mears. You can't be Mears. We know Mears." "Right. Well, I'm Bob Holt." Yeah, you're Bob Holt, yeah. "Well, we know that sector better than anybody." "Oh dear. Oh, well, okay, well, we might have to have a fight on that one." But anyway, The point was, what they said was, Bob, you'd be disgusted now with the sector. It's really gone backwards. Now that really disappoints me because
Me too.
we were part of building that sector much more professional. And they said, it needs you back, Bob. It needs you back in the sector. What would you do with an X and a Y? I said, well, I'd try and retrain an X. And if an X couldn't be trained, he'd have to go, wouldn't he? Well, that's the problem, Bob, isn't it? The sector sort of puts up with people, doesn't. Well, it's not macho. It's not something tough guy. It's, can we get there with this management team? No. Then we've got to change it, haven't we? We've got to create
Yeah.
some change, not just carry on with inertia. It's not going to happen. Come on.
I
Cash
don't
is
think
always
it's
the king, Mark, isn't it? Irrespective whether you're tough or weak or you're educated or not, cash is always king. And every CRO, every chief exec will start his day, I assume, looking at cash.
yeah.
I had the pleasure years and years and years ago, and this is one of the great things about what you said earlier about seeing different sectors and doing different things. Sat in front of the chief exec of a global cinema empire. And, I had a coffee with him sort of 9 o'clock in the morning, we're somewhere in the world. And he said to me, it's interesting, Bob. He said, the weather must have been really bad in Auckland, New Zealand yesterday. He said, because our occupancy seats in our cinema was up by 25 points, because they must have
Yeah.
been coming in from the rain. I thought, there's a guy who's got his hand on detail. He got a
Yeah.
global view on his business. And fair enough, move on.
I was lucky enough to be an apprentice for Ken Morrison, the late Ken Morrison. I was his apprentice. There's a whole story behind that, but we won't share that right now. But I have never known anyone so close to detail. And there's one thing I always remember. There's lots of things I remember. One thing in particular, he said, if a product on the shelf doesn't have a price in front of it, it's not for sale. And we sell stuff. And I just thought it is literally that simple.
What a great philosophy. I grew up, anybody who's followed my story know my mother was started in abject poverty in the north of England and ended up owning a couple of grocers shops. And she would have been a minute version of Ken Morrison. And
Yeah.
my mother knew, and there was never any doubt, my dad worked for her. There was never any doubt about that. When I'm interviewed like this, oh, what did your father do? He worked for my mother. Oh, I'm sorry. My mother, as you say. And, the number of times I've heard my mother say, Jim, no, it is one and tuppence, or it's hang on. Oh, no, 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 but you're right, absolutely. Attention to detail. Sometimes we've
Yeah,
got it,
it
sometimes we,
matters.
we move on. Yeah.
And we've mentioned a couple of people that are a bit older than the Gen Zs that you were talking about earlier. It's not an age thing. It's a how you view things. You're saying that there's a couple of superstars that were coming through in the beauty business in a Gen Z. I mean, that proves it's not an age thing. It's more about principles. It's more about discipline. It's more about getting it down to basics and then delivering those basics correctly, but with an element of gravitas and decision making. Don't. One thing that drives me crazy at an executive level is procrastination. You come in, you assess it, and you make the decision. And experience gives you that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I probably can't even spell procrastination if I'm being honest, but well, I can, but so I mean, if anything, I make quick decisions. Sometimes, let's be clear, you get it wrong. Sometimes, it doesn't always go right. But however, management teams need somebody at the top who's a decision maker. And the number of times, I've sat down with people and said, "Are we doing this or what, guys? Are we doing it? Come on, we've all bought into it. We don't need a
Yeah,
meeting to decide the next stage. We bought into it." And Mark, people on here some people will know me, some people won't. Once we've made a decision collectively, if it goes wrong, it was collective decision. It's
yeah,
not
you
finger
come together.
pointing. Never ever have a blame culture ever. It's look, we thought it was the right thing to do. It didn't work. Move on. Right, what we're going to do? Where we're going to get here? What we're going to move forward? And
Yeah,
that. Look, I mean, we mentioned age. I'm at the coming to the end of a working life, I suppose. But I've got more energy than most people. A third of my age, never mind half my age. I still run my life as I'm 39. Why not? Get up early every morning, do something. you know, got to get through. I've always got a pile of papers on my desk. Come on, what's happening today? I'm going
Yeah.
here today. I've already done one review of a report this morning because that's what I've done since I was 16 years of age. And I think Ken Morrison is probably no longer with us, but I can guarantee you, until the end of the day, he would be reading the Grocer magazine, seeing what
Yeah.
was happening and what is the price of X, because that's how
Oh
you
yeah.
are. And if you've done it every day of your life, that's how it is.
Well, it's knowing the detail. It's well. I think when you know the detail, it probably shows that you care. And going to the chief exec that you met at the cinema business, who was assuming it was raining in Auckland, and he knew it was raining in Auckland,
Of course he did.
or the Gen Zs who were coming through. The reason they're coming through is because they understand the detail as well, and they're getting behind it. And you're right. You can't have a blame culture if you're doing it together. You're doing it together. There's no sucking through teeth afterwards. There's no throwing someone under the bus afterwards. And you treat people fairly and treat them right, and then you do it together. And yes, you'll lose people along the way, but you'll keep more than you lose, I think.
Yeah, it's funny, Mark. I mean, I think, my upbringing probably has a lot to say for, obviously I brought up in the north of England, feet on the ground. Never, ever in my life have I ever thought I'm somewhere up there in the clouds. My feet are very firmly on the ground. And, in Mears, it used to be a standard expression to say to people, look, mate, male or female, it doesn't matter you've got an ego, it's not a problem. But be clear. There's a bus parked outside every office every day with strategy written on it. Either get on it, or if you miss it, you've missed it. Whilst you preen yourself and telling somebody how good you are, we've all gone. We're on the bus. It's moving forward. We've got a market that's exploding, and we're grabbing it because if we don't, somebody else will. The
Yeah,
class. I
exactly.
mean, somebody will have heard me say before. Friday afternoon. What was my message to my management team from lunchtime onwards? Ring your top 3 clients. Yeah, but he's on holiday. Just leave a message on his mobile. Hi, Fred. Just letting you know we're around if you need any help. And the number of times you would get a call, local authority world, of course, and it's 5+5. Sorry to trouble you. Yeah. What's your problem, Fred? We've got a real problem with one of our car parks. I know you don't do the car parks, but any chance, leave it with me. What is your problem? It's
Love
flooded. It's
that.
got a problem. It's broken. Leave it with me. Not how much have you got a budget for? Leave it with me. Monday morning. Oh, you're so thankful you've pulled us out of the mire on blah 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 blah. Just send me a bill. We won't send you a bill. We'll talk when we have our monthly meeting. We'll see what it cost and da 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 and sort it out. And guess what? We became the go-to for our customers to
Yeah.
say, you got a problem, bring him up at Mears. He'll sort it. Yeah, but they don't do car parks. They don't. So what? Go to him. He'll sort it for you. And it's the way business is built.
I think that message is gold. I mean, given the fact that I've worked, I've been doing this 20 odd years now. Out of the handful of people that have done extremely well in the industries that I tend to serve, I tend to work across all of them now. But earlier days, it tend to be a lot of blue collar workforce. There's a few people that have come through and done really well, and they've all got the exact same mentality, which is speak to the customer and help them, and the rest will come. Just do that first. And how did everyone else forget that? It's crazy. But then
Yeah.
that's why some people carry on and do well, and that's why some people don't do well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
So,
that was a. I think if there's anything that I'll take away from our conversation, I think it's that piece of advice.
mm,
And then I think on top of that as well, in terms of building a high performing team whilst you're in a turnaround, I think what's clear to me is that you set the strategy, you make it simple, you communicate it well, you set targets to make sure it's delivered, and you monitor those targets as much as you need to do, which might be hourly or daily in the beginning. And
yeah,
that's the way to turn around a business.
absolutely.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Bob, thank you very much for your time. So I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I hope everyone else enjoys the podcast as well. Hopefully we'll see you again in a turnaround of a global business that needs some support, whether it's got a chief exec or not got a chief exec currently. Then it'd be great to work with you in something like that. But it's great
Okay.
to see you, Bob.
Thank you, Mark. Have a
Thank you
good
very much,
day.
sir. Bye.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye.